Well, hello everybody. My name is Joanna and I have Sam here with me today. And this is actually pretty exciting. This is the first time I've ever done this. And I think you're the best person to do this with because I know absolutely nothing about you. Today, I just want to know more.
Absolutely. No, Joanna, I really appreciate the opportunity to do this, have this conversation. Obviously, we've been working together for 2.5 years now, but in different offices, which can sometimes feel like a pretty big distance. And so it's cool to have an opportunity to get to know each other better.
Yeah, 100%. I want to hear about your life. I want to hear about how you got into the finance world, essentially what got you here, because from my understanding, I think you have a pretty cool story to tell.
I appreciate that. So my background, how did I end up doing what I do and working in finance? So I'll be honest up front, finance, as a little kid, people have different dreams, different goals. I was a big baseball player. Maybe I want to play for the Boston Red Sox or go into something like that. And I actually ended up studying for a sports management degree. And so that's what I got my degree in. I did 4 years at UMass Amherst. I would describe myself as not particularly ambitious when I was younger. And so I didn't really have a set goal in mind. I figured I like sports. I want to study sports, work in sports one day and figure out my path from there. And so through a couple different internships that I had with different sports, golf, baseball, after I graduated from college, I ended up working in obstacle course racing, of all things, professional obstacle course racing, which is a bigger market than you might expect if it's not something that you're totally familiar with. What ended up happening is obstacle course racing is, of course, it's an events-based business. And when the pandemic happened, I lost a job that I really loved because of factors outside of my control. And so the first thing I really thought of when that happened is I thought of my father, actually. So my father has worked in finance for his entire career, 40 years in the business. And I saw sort of the impact that had on me as a child. He had a lot of control over his schedule. He was always around for dinner. He was always around to, coach my baseball team. And taking that experience and my understanding of how he really has a lot of control over his own job and is not really subject to some of those outside factors like a pandemic, I called him. I said, hey, this is what just happened with my job in sports. I don't think that this is something that I'll be able to sustain long term. I don't want to go through this again. How do I do what you do? And he told me the steps. Which, there's obviously more to the story, but ultimately the decision for me to get into finance came down to I want to take more control over my own future and have that same level of daily autonomy, being able to help people and being around for some important moments in my future.
Do you think you're more of a type A individual? I feel like I have found that the majority of people that do this are type A.
I absolutely agree. I think everybody is their own different degree of type A when coming into a business like this. And I would describe myself as type A, but maybe on the softer side, because I'm very relationship driven, very relationship focused. That's always been my style. I'm very outgoing. I'm very talkative, as you'll come to learn from this conversation. So
I think that's a great quality to have, especially in this world, in this business, because what we're doing is building relationships with people, essentially having people trust us. So that's definitely the number one thing. So as far as your father, I know that for a while, you absolutely did not want to do anything finance related.
Right.
Was that more of a rebellion thing, maybe, that you just didn't want to follow the course, or what happened there?
No, not quite. Not rebellion. My parents were great growing up. Never felt any need to rebel. They were awesome. I think for me, not wanting to get into finance more just had to do with my interests lying elsewhere. Growing up, I grew up in an environment where I had the background of finance. My father was always teaching me about how to save properly and how to be frugal and not be, for lack of a better phrasing, be stupid with your money. And so having that background, I felt, okay, great. Well, I have this foundation to lean on, but my interests, I like sports. That's really all I would think about is I like sports. And so my career aspirations were really just figure out what to do in that world. And it really, the not wanting to be in finance had a lot more to do with just not being passionate about it when I was younger, which has since changed. Having, from the outside looking in, I feel like a lot of people don't really understand what our day-to-day life is like and what working in finance is like. And I think I was a victim of that. And having been in the industry now for close to 3 years, my perception has entirely changed and my passion has grown a lot in this industry.
I can definitely say the same. I think any kid grows up wanting to do this. I think when you're little, you want to be an astronaut, you want to be a chef, you want to do something exciting. However, as I got older, and even when I got into this career, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do. I didn't even know that I wanted to do this until a couple months in, and I was like, oh, I love this. It's a multifaceted world, if that makes sense, where I get to talk to people, get to help people, and also at the same time, every day is different for me.
Right.
And essentially, to backtrack on what you said, people don't know what we do, or people just have a misconception of what we do. Essentially, what we do is just talk. We just talk to people and figure out what they want, what their goals in life are, and if we can help them to get there. And I think that's the most rewarding part, for sure.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that we deal with, I think there's really two that come to mind. One is that we can maybe make money grow on trees. And I wish that was the case. But, really we can just learn about people and work within their means. And I think that's a big misconception, is that we're really just able to help them with what they have. And with helping them with a starting point, we're able to help them get to their own personal definitions of financial success and financial health, right? And but then the other, misconception is that almost maybe the stigma around finance bros and finance girls, people who work in this industry, that was something that in college, being in the business school, we got booed at graduation when they announced the business school.
Oh, no.
Because I think there's just that perception.
Yeah.
And I think for myself, when you really get to sit down and have somebody who is open-minded and really is searching for somebody who just can help them with an area that they don't know a lot about, then you really find these relationships to be more personally and professionally rewarding than people might think. But with all that said, Joanna, I know that my style is very talkative, very outgoing, very relationship driven. And while I'm sure you're relationship driven as well, I think you and I are sort of a yin and yang when it comes to our personal, styles and professional styles. So what's your approach to these conversations and these relationships?
I'm not a small talker. I don't necessarily do that, where I just want to know the real answers and I want to ask the real questions. So I would put my style as just a little bit more blunt and a little bit more direct than maybe some people are prepared for. But I think that helps me because with my directness, I also get direct answers and I get a direct goal, if that makes sense. I think sometimes these types of conversations, especially when it comes to personal finances, it's anxiety inducing for sure. People come in and it's a very vulnerable state to be in, where it's like, here's my bank account, here are my finances, what do I do? So I try to be as direct and as even tone and as neutral as possible, just because I understand that it is a heavy conversation sometimes. And if I don't attach any emotion to it, then I think that allows the person that I'm speaking to kind of detach themselves from the emotion as well. I also just want real, raw answers, and for me to get those, I have to ask very uncomfortable questions. Right. I don't like tiptoeing around things. I just want to know, because I cannot help anybody if I don't know what the reality is. And I have found that the more direct I am, the more respect I gain. And I really appreciate that. But I definitely love the relationship part of this business as well. It's just something that for me is not as natural. I try to work on it a lot, which is why I put myself in these situations and why I want to surround myself with other people that are like that, because I think naturally you learn. I think working with people that have the skills you don't have is a strength. Absolutely. They complement you instead of backing what you already have. And I think that's why I like doing this. Yeah, absolutely. I think it reminds me of a quote. I think I posted it on LinkedIn recently, actually, of your comfort zone is the enemy of your growth. Because your comfort zone, you've pretty much maximized your strengths in the areas that you're most comfortable in. There's nowhere else to really go up from there. And whether that's personally, whether it's professionally, if you are not stepping outside your comfort zone to do conversations like this and put yourself out there, then you're never going to really fill either of those areas of your personal and your professional growth. I've become such an advocate for that. I want to say in the past couple of years, where I want to be as uncomfortable as possible. That's my main goal. Even if something doesn't work out, to me, it's just, okay, I tried it and I failed. Who cares? I can just move on and learn from it. But that's my main focus. I want to be as uncomfortable as I can because that's just what's going to help me grow. Naturally, it's going to get me opportunities that maybe I'm not going to get otherwise. And also, by nature, even just growing up, I was just such an uncomfortable person in the sense that I was so scared of being judged. I was so scared of not doing things because of maybe my own fear of failure or whatever. And I got tired of that. I got tired of missing out on opportunities, or I got tired of passing on things just because I was scared to do it.
Right.
And I think a flip just switched in my brain one day, and I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. So now I just intentionally put myself in very uncomfortable situations just to maybe see something out of it. And I think the way my life has panned out, just by making that decision, I think everyone should try that. Everyone should make a goal to do something so uncomfortable at least once a week, because that's just going to get you to a place that you didn't think you could go. It's going to teach you to trust yourself a little bit too, because it does require a certain level of confidence to be able to do those things, and that's just going to grow over time as well.
Absolutely. So you mentioned one day it just like a switch was flipped. Can you pinpoint a moment or maybe a time when you felt like it really did switch for you?
I don't think there was a specific moment. I think at one point I started realizing, or just looking back at things that, to give maybe a dumb example, but I remember being maybe 10 years old and I had a piano recital. So nervous. I did not want to play in front of people. I didn't want to do it. So I left the building and essentially no-showed the crowd.
Oh no.
It was fine. The show went on because there were so many other kids playing too. They couldn't find me, so whatever. I also did the same thing at another school presentation. I had a habit of just disappearing when I was uncomfortable. And as I started growing up and, being a little bit older, I was like, I missed out on so many things. I would see pictures maybe of my friends or yearbooks, and I'm like, I wasn't there for the picture because I didn't do it, but I was there. And I got tired of that. And I was like, I can't do that anymore. And then I finally realized it's just not going to kill me.
Right.
It's going to make me severely uncomfortable, but it's not going to kill me.
Right.
I got tired of missing opportunities. I think that's led me down a good path now where that's not a life that I want to live.
That's a really interesting quote, actually. I was there, but I wasn't there, which is, growing up, I bet a lot of people face issues like that, but it's, even if you're there, maybe you're not fully present and really enjoying those experiences. You're just sort of along for the ride. And do you want to be the driver or do you want to be the passenger in your own life? And if it feels like you're the passenger in a lot of these experiences, then you weren't leading the charge. You were just missing out on a lot of things. So, well, on this theme then, Joanna, of wanting to be uncomfortable, this is your once a week thing, but I want to hear about your background. I'm always very open with whether it's people around the office or my clients about my background, where I come from. I don't know anything about you either. What was your journey to get here? I don't know anything about you.
Everything that I've ever endured or everything that has ever occurred in my life definitely has led me to be here. I grew up in the Dominican Republic, in a third world country. However, I grew up in a third world country, but with money, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Which, interestingly enough, there's a lot of similarities with being poor in America to being rich in a third world country. Where, for example, sure, I had somebody come into my house all day and clean and cook and whatever, and we had drivers and things like that, but, electricity was shut off for 3 days and we could do nothing about it just because infrastructure, things like that. So I grew up in the Dominican Republic. My entire family has always been entrepreneurial. Nobody in my family has ever had a job, meaning I don't think of anybody that just said, I'm going to go to my job today. My dad was always he owned a couple department stores. At one point he had a t-shirt brand. My sister owns a health insurance company down there. I have a brother that likes to sell Italian belts.
I should call him.
Yeah, you should. But essentially it was just one of those things that I just grew up with a lot of freedom. Yeah. Similar to you, where you saw your dad with this flexible schedule, and I saw that growing up too, and I kind of wanted that. And when I was 21 years old, I was so lost. I was still in school, I was working as a server, and it was one of those things that I didn't want to stay doing that. So I decided, what can I do? Or I started thinking, what can I do to grow? And that's where kind of came upon the finance world, and I didn't know anything about it. And it was not a career that I chose. It was something that chose me. When I started, I gave myself almost like a 90-day test drive where I was like, okay, I'm gonna try this for 3 months. If I don't like it, I'll move on, do the next thing. And I ended up loving it. I decided at one point, I'm gonna give it my all. No backup, no plan B, and I have no choice but to succeed in it, because if I have no backup, then what am I gonna do? And that's just the mentality I've always had into it. And now I'm here, and I absolutely love just the relationships I've built, even like the colleagues that I've gotten to know. The mentalities around the people I work with too is so invaluable to me, where it's people that are very like-minded, very driven, also very type A.
Yeah.
I enjoy that. I love working with people. I love getting to help people and just watching, I would say, the relief sometimes in people's lives or in their families' lives.
Yeah.
Sometimes by having a 40-minute conversation with somebody, they're like, I feel so much better.
Right.
And to me, that's, oh wow, that was an hour out of my day. To them, that was a very long time of stress just being relieved.
Absolutely.
So that's my favorite part of what I do.
It's a common question I hear from a lot of people, but what is one piece of advice you would give your younger self? Whether we're talking professionally, personally, just what's a piece of advice?
I think for myself, I was a completely different person when I was younger. I definitely grew up in a different environment, to say the least, where I grew up very religious. My dad is actually a Baptist pastor. So I grew up in a very self-disciplined, rigid, where I just had to follow the rules, and it was also very God-centric. So to put it in simple terms, I think growing up, I had this mentality of how things had to be. And I would plan things out, and I would get incredibly frustrated with myself when maybe I didn't meet that standard, or things just didn't pan out, though, because life just doesn't operate in a linear way. Things are going to happen. I saw this recently on LinkedIn, actually, and it really resonated with me, even though it was a very simple quote. Prepare for chaos, not for order. And that to me really resonated, because at least growing up, I prepared for things to pan out the way that they shouldn't. And now I approach my life in a way of, I need to prepare for the absolute worst, because if the best case scenario happens, then great. But if the worst case scenario happens, I don't want to deviate from my life path. I don't want to deviate from my goals. I just need to know what to do in that situation. So that's one piece of advice that I would give to myself is, don't look at things in a linear way. Don't look at things like they're going to work out the way that they're supposed to, or the way that you think they're going to supposed to. They're going to work out in the way that they're going to work out, but prepare for chaos, not for order. I think that's something that if I had learned that later or earlier on in life, I think a lot of things would have turned out a lot different for me.
Interesting.
What would you say for yourself?
Yeah, so what you said actually sort of segues into what I was thinking, which is if I talk to myself at 10 years old, I would say set goals for yourself. Growing up, I was more of a go with the flow type personality, and I think there's still a strong aspect of that in my personal life, but I never really thought about specific goals that I had set for myself when it comes to what I want to do when I'm grown. I mentioned this earlier, but I liked sports. So I was like, I'll go study sports. If you had asked me, well, what do you want to do in the sports world? Do you want to be in the front office of a professional sports team? Do you want to sell sponsorship packages? Do you want to be on the event side and organize events? I wouldn't have had an answer for you. I never really had a specific goal in mind for my career. And with things that happened with the pandemic, ultimately everything happens for a reason. I ended up exactly where I'm meant to be. But if I could go back, I would say set specific goals for yourself. Because if I had specific goals, I think a lot of the decisions I made regarding my education, my hobbies, clubs I participated in, all of those things would have been different.
Yeah.
Because it would have been in service of a specific goal and not just, well, I'll figure it out as I go. And having a clear direction for yourself, I think, is something that is huge for your personal life, for your professional life. That way, when there is chaos, you have a plan because you can adapt to the situation with that same end goal in mind instead of adapt to the situation and figure out a new path.
100%. I completely agree with that. I want to thank you for taking the time to do this and to sit down and talk to me. I feel now like I've learned so much about you that I didn't know. And I was talking to somebody last night, actually, and I said, I think that knowing our colleagues and knowing the way that our mind operate help us work better. That's just, that should be common sense, but I do think that the environment that we're in, our team is very important to us because we're in a very specific line of work that only maybe we can understand. That's true for other industries too, but with what we do, it can be a little bit isolating sometimes.
Sure.
And I do really appreciate you taking the time to be here and to talk. And I really like your insight. And I've always respected you, and I've respected the way that you operate yourself, or the way that you operate. But not only are you professional, I think that goes without saying, but I've always appreciated that you have the same demeanor about you regardless of what's going on. And you're a constant. Probably the best thing that you can be, not only in this industry, but also in the world. I'm a little bit the opposite of that. I tend to be a little bit on I'll wake up one day and we will see what will happen. But I just think you are so consistent. You are always there, always with a smile. I never know, like, you could be going through the worst thing ever and I just would not know that. And I just really appreciate the way you carry yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. This was an awesome conversation. I'm glad that I got to learn more about you as well. I'm just really thankful for the opportunity. I hope we'll have another chance to do something like this. And just my perspective over the past 2.5 years, it's been great to see somebody who is so, exude in the theme of consistency, a confidence about you that maybe I find my own head trash is sometimes lacking. And whether it's perception is reality sometimes, the way I always have viewed you is somebody who is very successful, very self-assured, and very confident. And it's something that I've tried to implement, and you've really inspired me to have that same level of confidence in myself. And so I really respect that about you as well. And I look forward to building off of this. This to me feels like more of a step one in our professional relationship. And there's a lot of room that you and I could have to work together and be successful together over the next 20 years, 30 years of our career. So I really appreciate the opportunity.